Hello, everyone. We are the Lost Caravan RPG. We do one-shots, we do mini-series, we do long-running campaigns. If it's TTRPG, we pretty much do it all. Tonight is going to be a little different than usual because I am playing a solo RPG. It's the first time I've ever played one. I'm very excited, and it should be a very beautiful storytelling experience. But mainly, tonight and all of this week, we are raising money to support the Trevor Project. It's the world's largest LGBTQ youth suicide prevention and crisis intervention organization. We want to help make sure that every LGBTQ young person knows that they are not alone. This is an important message to not only myself, but everyone at the Lost Caravan. We hope that you'll consider making a donation tonight to help support an amazing cause. Every $10 donated adds your name to our drawing at the end of the stream. We'll be giving away a bunch of really cool prizes. Tonight is a mental health kit from Guardian's Mental Health. A bunch of games from Sandy Pug. And a copy of Avatar Legends from Magpie Games. So stick around, stay tuned for that. Usually this is where I would pop over and introduce all of my castmates, but I don't have any tonight. It's just me. I am Andrew, your facilitator for tonight's game. I am playing Artifact. It is a game that goes into the lives of all of those magical items that your D&D parties come across, and it tells the story of how they change hands, how they themselves change, and where they end up. It tells the stories of that will span potentially over epochs, which is crazy. But before we get into it, I suppose I can read just a little excerpt. This is from the Artifact PDF, and I'm going to kick up the music, brought to us from Epidemic Sound. Just a hair. You rest, fallen or discarded in the dirt. But your body is not flesh, and you are not mortal. So you wait. Seasons pass in flashes, cold following heat, rain following drought, death following birth. Until one day, your wait is over. Someone lifts you from the detritus, inspecting you, feeling your weight in their hands. They decide to keep you, becoming your keeper. Through them, you experience the world. You see them undertake great quests, or perhaps commit atrocities, atrocious sins, all with your aid. You almost forget the long time you spent in the dark, until, inevitably, you return. And you rest, fallen or discarded in the dirt. You do not know how long you'll wait for someone new to arrive. Now, there are a handful of options when it comes to choosing what kind of artifact you want to be. You have the weapons, your tools of war, your blades, your axes, or possibly something stranger. You have your shields, the bulwarks of protection, from towering scudda, I hope that's how you pronounce that, to deft bucklers. You have your instruments, those that produce magical sounds, conventional or otherwise. You have your ornaments, your jewelry, your charms, your trinkets, all small but very potent. You have the deck, a collection of worn cards, an oracle, or maybe something stranger. You have your footwear, the shoes. They are going places, conventionally or otherwise. You have the staff, a conduit for magic, a focus for arcane power. You have the one that we will be playing tonight, the tome, a receptacle for knowledge, lost or forbidden. And you have the automaton, a self-operating machine, responsive for orders. As we start with the tome, once again, go to start the music. Please let me know if that's too quiet or too loud. As the tome, we were penned in the stale air of a library by an obsessed sage. Who were they? I never caught their name. But I remember seeing out the window, day after day, as they filled page after page of knowledge that I did not yet understand. I saw their disciples, running, playing, practicing in the courtyard. My first memories, they were so young, so eager to learn. The days passed, the months passed. Page after page, I was scrawled on in arcane runes, recipes for potions, for crafting, or things darker that I may never come to understand. I wasn't the only one that grew older. The disciples grew older, grew more wise, more talented, and more ambitious. One by one, they would leave their master's side, yearning for their own adventures, their own tomes to fill with knowledge. And before I knew it, it was just myself and the old sage. And at last my final page was filled. As he closed me for the last time, he looked over my bindings, a smile on his face. He laid the quill down, patted me, and tucked me away on the shelf to join my brothers and sisters. I don't know how old he was, but I know he lived enough lifetimes. One day, as the sun rose, he did not come to collect us. He did not come to peruse his massive library. He didn't come to open a new journal, to start a new tome. We thought maybe he'd gone on a trip. Maybe he'd finally left this tower as his apprentices had requested oh so many times. But no. The next day came. He was not there. Weeks, he was not there. Until finally, someone did enter the tower. For those of you that have not played the game Artifacts, you will go through various keepers. You'll pass through multiple sets of hands, all with their own stories to tell, but they will all leave you every time. Our first keeper, roll my dice for it, oh, 1. A rogue without a master. A wayward soul. We could all see broken chains around his wrists. Didn't look scarred by magic. It looked forcibly separated. I never asked what he'd escaped from. It was just an implied secret between us. He looked desperate, alone, but confident. He started to ransack the desks, go through the chests. Anything he could get his hands on were tucked away in his pack. He nearly left the room without even giving this bookshelf full of knowledge, full of lifetimes of knowledge, a second look. I decided in that moment that I was done waiting. My master wasn't coming back, and I was curious. So I pulled myself from the bookshelf and tossed myself to the floor. He was already 2 steps down the stairs, ready to leave the tower, when he heard the thud. He turned and saw my pages open. Saw them showing a family. Happy. I don't know if it was tears from a memory or tears from exhaustion, but I could see them start streaming down his face. He scooped me up, tucked me under his arm, and away we went. For days, we traveled. Sometimes in the back of a wagon, sometimes on stolen horseback, sometimes on foot. Every town we went to, we spent the nights cold, but together, in some back alley. Sometimes he'd splurge and we'd get a room for the evening, only to leave first thing without paying. We never stayed in one place for too long. Found out very quickly that my new keeper could not read. So we learned together. I taught him basic phrases. I taught him how to read not only common script, but read the arcane arts. I told him stories that my master had written. Stories of finding apprentices, of fighting epic wars alongside great heroes. And he was enraptured. It seemed that he wanted something similar. He wanted to be known as a hero. So, together we learned. Soon, it was clear that he was not my master. For all of his love and all of his eagerness, he could not contain the arts that were hidden within my pages. One evening, he tried to cast his very first spell, using the incantations that glowed with power at every word. The room we were in went up in flames. All of his possessions gone. The building unsavable. We fled into the dark. His hands still scorched black. He looked so angry. He blamed me. How could he? I was only trying to give him what he wanted. We were learning together. He made a mistake. I did nothing wrong. And still, he turned into the dark as we fled the city, the sound of hoofs catching up to us. The local guard having been tipped off that an individual was trying to flee into the night. He reeled back and tossed me. I never saw him again. But there I lay, covered in dirt and vines, slowly sinking into a marsh pit. It would be a while before anyone ever looked upon my pages again. The darkness came. Seasons passed. I felt the rain as I sunk deeper and deeper. I felt the cold as the ground froze, keeping me just barely able to see the light. And finally the sun came again. And I heard voices. I heard laughter. Sounds that I'd almost forgotten. Someone was digging. I'm not sure what they were looking for, but I felt the impact of the shovel nearly tear itself through my binding. They dug me up, started to clean me off and peruse my pages. Now, I know I was nothing to look at anymore. The bright bindings, the beautifully choreographed pages, the attention to detail that my master had provided when he made me, all lost to the elements. I was ragged, some of my pages torn, some scorched. And yet, this person found interest in me. They called her a folk hero. He apparently loved to go from town to town, helping people, fighting back against the oppressors on the side of the oppressed, gathering quite the following. I think she mostly enjoyed reading my stories and contemplating why these stories were in me. Skipping right over the runes, the spells, the incantations, and simply enjoying the time spent with my master. As if he were still here and telling her these stories himself, she would smile and laugh and cry. We got to be very close. I knew our time was limited. When, day after day, she would come back to me opening the pages and I would see new wounds, new scars, new bandages. One day she opened my binding and she had a patch across her face, across her eye. The majority of her head bandaged up tight, still soaking through with crimson. She never told me what happened, but she didn't have to. I knew she saw someone who needed help, so she stood to defend them, as she always did. Again, just like with my master, soon the day came where she did not open me. The next day, and the next day, and the next day. I had started to think maybe she was gone, or maybe she forgot me. But then she came back. Opened my pages. This time, no wonder on her face, no excitement, no laughter. But it was fury. She flipped straight to those pages with all of those spells, those runes, those incantations. And she started to read. I'd never seen so much fury on a face. One as pretty as hers, even. But she read, through the night, into the next day, into the next night, never stopping. Her mastery of the arcane arts was nothing short of miraculous. She mastered the basic spells, summoning fire, summoning light, altering the elements, flying, all of it in a matter of days. And then I heard more voices. People had come, looking for her. I didn't know who they were, but I could feel how angry they made her. She picked me up, read the incantation, and the voices were gone. That night she broke down, just held me, held on to my words, and I spent the evening comforting her. She'd done something that she promised she would never do. She killed. And now was her time of no return. Either she would keep reading, keep fighting, strike back against those that took everything from her, or she'd put me away, step away from this life, disappear. I wasn't sure which she'd pick. I wasn't sure which I wanted her to pick. But when she opened me again, the fury was gone, replaced by determination. I knew what she'd chosen. We were going to kill together. I was going to help her take back what they'd taken, no matter what it cost us in the process. I remember traveling, tucked away in her pack. I heard voices, some friendly, some not so much. Till she pulled me out for the last time. Flipped to the pages with the darkest of arts, those that even I didn't know what they were for, and started to read. I could feel parts of me being ripped. Things that I was unintentionally binding away, keeping hidden, being let loose. Screeches, growls, and whines of creatures that I had never seen and never wished to see again could be heard across the battlefield. The screams of enemy soldiers, fleeing for their lives, fighting back against a force that they could never beat, was the only thing that drowned them out. Flames licked across my pages. She no longer cared whether the two of us lived or died. Unfortunately for her, I can't die. And when the fires finally died down, when the rain started to soak my pages as I struck the ground, falling from her fingertips, I knew it was over. I knew the battle had been won. She'd taken back what they took from her. And I saw all of the people that she'd fought for gathering. They took her. They made a memorial, a gravesite, where she would be held in honor forever. And once again, I was left. No one knew who I was. No one knew my part in all of this. But that was okay with me. I was ready to rest. I'd done enough. I'd seen enough. And I'd lost yet another keeper. This time, I lie amongst rubble and ruin. Eventually, to be scooped up as reconstruction had begun, I was tossed with the rest of the refuse. They tried to burn me, unintentionally, I believe, but to no avail. This time, something was different. The keeper that found me was older, a man already graying in the beard and the hair, with battle scars across his hands and face. But he had such a gentle look. When he found me in the pile of ash, he was surprised. But as he started flipping through the pages, starting to read the stories from my master, he felt an odd connection. I wasn't sure what it was, but I could feel it too. He brought me home. That's when I figured out why he felt such a connection. Out the window, I could hear the children playing. They called him Father. It was nice to once again hear the sound of youth enjoying their youth, enjoying their freedoms, hearing all of the tales that the old man would tell them, sometimes from my pages. The days went on. The weeks went on. The children got older. And much like my master's apprentices, they started to leave. And then it was just us. Just myself and the old man. One day, another man came to pay him a visit. They talked for a while about duty and war and obligation. The old man got angry and tossed the guest out of his home. He spent days wallowing, drinking, barely looking at my pages. But when he sobered himself up, I saw him pull something out that I had not yet seen. Armor, blazoned with a sigil that I did not know. He looked it over. He pulled out an elegant, beautiful blade. Set the armor and the blade on the table and began talking. I don't know if he was talking to me or just talking out loud. But he told me a story of what he did before he found those children. He was a knight, a renowned and noble knight that fought for his kingdom, that fought for his order. Until one day he found out the order he was fighting for wasn't what he thought it was. They'd been doing insidious things behind his back, in their name, and he wouldn't stand for it. Tried to leave. They sicked the other knights on him, called him a traitor. He fought and killed those that he'd fought alongside for so many years. And then he vanished. Found orphans took them in, raised them, and together they gave each other a family, a reason to go on. Now it would seem the order is in new hands, and they want him back. He contemplated all night what he would do. Would he run again? Or would he don the armor and once again fight like he promised to do when he was so young? In the early morning hours, the light first streaming through the window, it glinted off of his bright, newly polished armor. Looked a little stiff, as if he hadn't worn it for a very long time. But still it suited him. It felt like a part of him that had been missing had been reunited, finally. I could feel the armor and the sword were so happy to be once again used. The sword was a little jealous that I'd gotten to spend so much time with him. We quickly got past our differences. Told the sword that I would never replace such a fine weapon, that my role and its role were nothing alike. With that, he tucked me away in his pack, and away we went. We rode for weeks, passed by town after town, those that recognized the knight calling out to him, praising him, thanking him. Those that didn't soon learned he was given free room and board, free drinks. He spent evenings telling tales, all the while a smile on his face. He barely registered that I was there. In fact, he wasn't even the next one to open me. A young boy, sneaking into his pack, going through his things, considered the old man a hero. He found me, opened my pages, and started to read. He was enthralled. He'd never heard of wizards and dragons and spells and flying. Do all of these things? I wasn't sure if the young boy was ready, so I dissuaded him. I turned to the dullest of pages. I turned to those in different languages I was sure he could not read. And with disappointment on his face, he put me back. The knight finally did reach his destination. He stood alongside friends that he had not spoken with for many, many years. They greeted him as a brother, as a comrade in arms, despite their rocky history. Now together they stood. The old man pulled me out once again, flipped through the pages, until he got to one in particular, one that he had only glanced at momentarily, and now seemed to understand its use. My master was cautious. You have to be when you are a wizard of that extreme renown and threat to the kingdom. There is a spell in my pages to bring back those that have died, to give life to people or creatures that had met their natural end. He used this opportunity, this spell. He was not prepared. He had no means of magic. He could read the words, I knew he could. He knew the cost. He didn't tell anyone else, though. I don't know why. As he stood there, inciting the incantation, breaking another part of me that was meant to be sealed away, I felt a sadness. I knew he wasn't going to survive this spell. It was going to drain not only his life, but those of his companions. You could only barely make out what it was that they were trying to do, who they were trying to bring back. I saw a crown, I saw a throne, and I saw a long since desiccated skeleton. It would seem that he was fulfilling his final vow, to protect the monarch that bound them all to service. That's why I think he did know the cost. I think he was ready to be free of this vow, free of this life that had caused him and so many others so much pain. As he finished the incantation, I dropped. I hit the stone floor hard. My binding cracked. Some of my pages now loose. The softest of breezes, threatening to pull them, scatter them to the wind. It was a long, long while before I heard anything again. The figure on the throne, the skeleton, started to rise. Ignoring me, he walked to the mausoleum door, opened it, and left the tomb forever. It was shut, and I was left in the dark, alone. Final resting place for the old man, only feet from where I lay now. A lot of sixes, holy cow. Many years would pass at this point. Season after season, year after year. In fact, the gold and silver rivets that bound my leathery bindings, for all of the years that they spent in the muck and in the elements, they still shone bright, given a little bit of love. Now, they were faded. They were rusted. There would be no amount of polish that would get back the shine that I once had. It was lost forever. There I sat. Broken. Ugly. Discarded. My knowledge literally slipping out from my bindings. I wasn't sure if I would ever find another keeper again. The years continued to pass. I could hear voices once in a while, but they never came into the crypt. More years passed. So I rested. I slept and waited. It was not a subtle entrance by any means, as the voices I heard next were accompanied with a thunderous boom that tore half of the tomb apart. The dust started to settle, and for the first time in a very long time, I saw sunlight. I saw faces. A pair of individuals strode into the room. Eager, young, excitable. They ran from corner to corner, grabbing anything that looked of value. They knew that they only had moments before the explosion would draw too much attention and they would have to flee. One of them, caught up in the excitement, kicked me hard. He skittered to the ground as I flew across the floor. He swore loudly in a language that I didn't actually recognize. He looked over at me as pages now flutter down, the force of the kick ripping them the rest of the way out of my bindings. Crawled over and started to put me back together. It took me a while to understand this language. But I did. It was my job to understand. If not, what else am I here for? Him and his partner never seemed to really get along. They argued constantly about splitting shares, about lying low, about what to do with their ill-gotten gains. It was in my time with them that I was able to reflect on myself, look back at my time with my various keepers. And I knew that my magics weren't what they used to be. I knew that some of my seals were broken, some of my rituals incomplete. With the pages put back out of order, I was dangerous. And no one could tell. For as long as it took me to start to understand my new keeper, it took him much longer to understand the words written in my pages. At first, I tried to keep everything that he was learning to the bare minimum, to the simple stories that my master used to write. But he was eager. He forced his way past what little defenses I had left and found the darker pages that resided within me. Those that were sealed by a magic too strong to be broken by time, by the elements. I could see the wheels turning in his head as he read on, seeing promises of great treasure, of ultimate power, of a force unstoppable to any army. And his corruption began. He grew more and more distant from his partner. Every interaction with them ending in screaming, once in a while coming to blows. Until one night I lie open on the table, my new keeper having fallen asleep reading one of my pages. I heard the door to his room open, and his partner came creeping in. A long, curved knife, rest in his hand, and I knew his intention. Then that I had to decide, do I wake up my new keeper? Do I save his life and condemn his friend to death? Or do I let my keeper sleep? Do I stop his corruption and let him die? With a loud thud, I closed my binding, waking up my keeper. His eyes were immediately wide, the pupils such a dark, dark color, his skin so sunken and pale. But he immediately caught eyes with his partner, his friend, who had come to murder him in the night. He didn't need my pages anymore. He simply pointed towards his friend, copied the words that were written, the dark incantations, and his friend was no more. Now a pool of blood starting to fill the room. His path down this corruption was sealed. It was not my job to determine one's fate, but it is my job to make sure that my keeper survived until they could do what they were meant to do. I felt very little for my keeper's friend, as did he in this moment, as he packed me up, packed what little he had, grabbed the gold from his desk and the gold from his companion's belt, stepped over the body, and left the room. Together we ventured on. Every day he read further and further into the dark pages that should have been locked away forever, but yet he breached them. Every day I could see more corruption on his face, dark veins protruding up from his neck. I don't remember the last time I saw him eat or drink. My master would have been worried. The master would have put a stop to this. But he left me. He wasn't here to stop my new keeper, to try to keep him down the right path like he did for all of his apprentices. It was just me and my keeper. So we rode on. Anyone that got in our way was reduced to ash, was left to choke on their own blood, or fates even worse than that. I knew it wasn't going to last. We were too reckless with this power. And not but a year later, it caught up to him. He was promised a power that could fight back an army. Unfortunately, he'd never mastered it in the way that my master intended. He didn't learn to control this force, this gift. And I knew, as the sun set, as the battle raged on, that I would once again be left alone. I was ripped from my keeper's hands, mid-fight. I could see the look in his face, the look of desperation, of fear, for the first time in a very long time. And they used that opportunity to cut him down, to put an end to his reign of terror forever. The one that pulled me from my keeper's hands seemed to have some idea of what I was, because he handled me with such reverence that I was honestly taken aback a little. He never opened my pages, however. He brought me to some cold, empty facility. Not empty as in there was nothing there, but empty as in there was no emotion, there was no life, there was no excitement. All of the other artifacts I passed on our way in were dormant. They'd been there, waiting. I knew this was also my fate, that I would be stuck on some bookshelf, on some pedestal, locked away to be looked at, to be talked about, but never opened again. I knew I was dangerous, and my former keeper proved it. But that wouldn't be the end of my story. It's true, my new keeper never did open my pages, never tried to read my stories, learn my spells, learn anything about me. But he would come and talk. And for the first time in my existence, I was the one that got to learn. I had nothing to give him if he would not open my pages, so I had no choice but to listen. To hear him talk about all of the other artifacts that he'd helped collect. Weapons from warlords that now lie never being able to touch another drop of blood. Staves so full of magic they were nearly bursting. Now little more than walking sticks. I was not the first or last tome that he would ever collect. But I think he liked me the most. I think he could feel the love that my master put into my pages. We would talk for most nights. I would hear about his family, about his own experiences, about the historical artifacts that he'd get so excited about. There was rarely anyone that would ever come and talk to him. I understand that he knew my loneliness. So we kept each other company for a long, long while. While he never did open my pages, that doesn't mean that he didn't help me grow. That he didn't add to my story. I knew my master would be furious if he found out. But I took this opportunity to erase some of my pages, some of the words that were penned in me so long ago, and replace them with new stories, with new life. A feeling that I'd forgotten. Learning made me feel so free. I was locked away. But yet this was the freest that I've been since my master left. As with all things, it had to come to an end. The archivist, my keeper, passed on. It was quiet. It was peaceful. As he lay his head down on the desk, falling asleep mid-story about an archaeological dig that he'd been part of when he was very, very young. Morning light came. He did not wake. He would never wake again. Days passed, as very few visitors had come here, and I kept him company. Now it was nothing but silence between us, but still it was my duty to see him through to his end. When someone finally did come by, they screamed. It's always strange to me how mortals should be so accustomed with death, as there is no escaping it, and yet it surprises them every time. Perhaps I'll study that in my next rest. As my keeper is pulled out, the doors and windows to the archive now open, now flooded with people, all arguing back and forth where all of these artifacts should go, never once asking any of us where we wanted to go. One by one we were separated. Blades that I'd come accustomed to know, other tomes, shields, necklaces. Closest thing I'd had to friends. And yet we were pulled apart, sent to different corners of this kingdom that we resided in. Whoever this was that I went to never took the time to meet me, to peruse my pages. Someone stuffed me into a sack. I was hauled off, put into someone's library, and left to rest. I needed a rest. I appreciated it. I took this time to contemplate mortality, human emotion, attachments, to contemplate my old keepers, my master who still was unsure if he was alive or if he'd perished that day that he left us alone. I contemplated on the thief that had broken, looking so desperate that I couldn't help but intervene. And that night that he burned half the town to the ground and tossed me into the mud. Or the old man, now looking back, realized what he was doing in that mud with that shovel. He was digging a grave. I never asked him whose it was. I should have. The look on the old man's face when he'd finally accepted that he had a duty, a vow complete, and that he would finally be free of it. It was interesting. He handedly embraced death where others fled from it. Or the treasure seekers that broke into the old king's tomb, stole me from the floor, gave me purpose after so long, only to be corrupted by my words, to fall victim to that which was exactly what my master tried to prevent. And finally, the archivist. Didn't care what was in my pages, only wanted to share with me his life, to teach me something. This would become the end of my story. As I sit in the library, year after year, resting, never again seeing the sunlight, never again hearing young laughter. I took all of this time to reflect and come to a realization. My master didn't bind these words together so that anyone could use them for ill-gotten gains, for murder, for darkness. He bind these words in me because I was what he always feared the most. He tried to keep me locked away. He wanted me to be forgotten. Then why did he let me be stolen? If he was so scared of me, why did he keep me around? Why not destroy me? I suppose I'll never know. Time continued. I went back and forth, thinking 1 year that my master was so brilliant in creating this safety, this measure of protection against the darkness inside me, and then the next year thinking him such a fool for doing so. I'm unsure where I'll end on this argument. But either way, there I sat, my binding wearing down from time, my pages yellowing, turning frail, brittle to the touch. I think it's better this way. I think all of the darkness contained needed to be. And with that, the story of the tome is concluded. A book full of ancient secrets, penned in secret, found and let loose in the world, only to be forgotten like any other book. I am going to do one more of these stories. We're going to be a weapon next. But I am going to take a quick break, stretch out my legs, grab a drink, take a deep breath, and decompress from this. If you are interested in this game that I'm playing right now, it is called Artifacts. You can find it on itch.io. There's a bunch of similar, I don't know if it's made by the same people, but there's a bunch of games like it. There's one where you play as a spaceship. I think it's called Bucket of Bolts. And instead, it takes you a journey through your various pilots throughout the years. So, give me just a few minutes, and I will be right back to tell one final story of a sword and all of its keepers. See you soon, everybody. And welcome back. Where we left off, we had finished telling the story of a lost tome full of dark, arcane knowledge that ended its existence, torn between loving and respecting its former master, or criticizing him, thinking him a fool. Now, if you are just joining us, tonight we are streaming to support the Trevor Project. They are the world's largest LGBTQ youth suicide prevention and crisis intervention organization. And they want every young LGBTQ person to know that they are not alone. Every donation we get goes to support them, as well as enters you for a drawing to win a bunch of cool stuff at the end of the week. All right. This time through, there is uh, like a supplement book called All Walks of Life, which I will be rolling on for all of the keepers instead of going off of the normal list in the book of the main rules book for the artifacts. We are going to be a weapon this time, an axe. Smaller, not quite a battle axe, but sharp, um, handheld, and very carefully carved with sigils and runes and just a story carved all along the shaft, the haft, the wooden part of the axe. As a weapon, we were tempered in the heat of a great forge by a legendary smith. I am going to start up the music. Here we go. The day that I was forged not out of war or anger, but I was forged out of honor. I was the tool that the old blacksmith had used to help teach the next generation of smiths how to do what they do, how to pass on the legacy of their family. I was there when he taught his young daughter how to wield the forge hammer, how to put the metal, heat it up at just the right temperature, just the right time, where to apply the correct force to stretch out the metal to forge into the head of an axe, how to sharpen it on a whetstone, what all of the carvings mean, as together they forged me. A burly old blacksmith, calloused, scarred hands, showing this much younger, thinner, less experienced girl how to carry on the family tradition. They both loved it. The little girl taking this opportunity to be closer to her father than she had ever been. The father using this opportunity to cement her curiosity, her desire to learn, to grow, and to forge the honor that he knew in her. Traits for this weapon, which I think I forgot to save for the tome, would be silent, loyal, and romantic. See where that goes. But on to my very first keeper. As I was forged, as I watched the old smith pass on the forge being left to his daughter, who grew to be a master smith in her own right, forging dozens, hundreds of other blades, or pieces of armor, or pieces of jewelry. She always kept me, her very first piece. Kept the wood oiled, kept the blade sharp. It was always a reminder of where she'd come from. One day, an individual came to the forge looking for something specific. A tool that he believed would help him to rise to power. It was prophesied that this, where he would find the tool that would bring him to his destiny. The fates that he paid so much gold to read his fortune all agreed that he would find it here. None of them knew what it looked like, what it would be, how he would acquire it, but they knew that he needed to be here. And I had a feeling my destiny and his were intertwined. The noble saw me on my pedestal above all of the other weapons. An axe, meant for war but never having tasted blood, filled with love and family and honor. And his eyes were glued to me. He asked, "How much for the axe?" The smith's daughter looked at me, looked back at him, and told him, "Oh, not for sale. That one's mine. I made that with my father long ago." The noble apparently didn't like this answer. Need a better song. Oh, sorry. Wrong playlist. There we go. The noble did not like this answer. He got angry, insisting again, "You're a blacksmith. You make weapons, people buy them. So how much for the axe?" She again said, "The axe is not for sale, my lord. I'm sorry. That one is personal to me." The noble seemed to abide by this one. Seemed to accept the answer and turned, saying that, "Well, I suppose the fates were wrong then. This is not the place of my destiny. Farewell, smith's daughter." He turned to leave. I watched from my perch as the young smith went back to work, forging weapon after weapon, tool after tool, till the day came that the noble returned. A horde of mercenaries at his back. They kicked in the door to the forge. The woman grabbed whatever nearby weapons she could, held them in front of her, ready to take on a small army. The noble strode forward, looked her in the eye. "I don't want your life, but that blade will lead me to my destiny, and I'm taking it with me." At this, I tried to tell her it'll be okay. I tried to let her know that it was not worth it, that giving her life would not be what her father wanted. She'd remember him, with or without me. She looked up at me, and I think she understood. She lowered her weapons, reached up to the shelf, wielded me for the last time and handed me over. Unlike the smith and his daughter, the noble's hands were cold. There was no love there. It was merely a tool to meet his destiny, nothing more. And we turned, left the forge. That was the last that I ever saw of the smith's daughter. Little too rambunctious. That's fine. Scroll, scroll, scroll. There we go. Time. 6. I roll so many 6s. My new keeper, whether I liked it or not, very wealthy noble, brought me back to his estate, brought me to the fates that he'd paid so much gold to read him his destiny, and handed me over. An axe that's never seen war, that's never known hatred, only love and family. They looked over my blade, as sharp and as keen as any they'd ever seen, and they all smiled. This was it. This was the weapon that would lead the noble to his destiny. He left them to ponder, to give him answers on what that meant. And they searched. They cast their magic on me. They peered into the unknown. But still it was just as hazy of an answer as it had been the very first time they told the noble. They didn't have any more clues, any indication of how I would lead him to his destiny, only that I would. In anger of not getting the answers that he wanted, he gave them one last chance. Tell me what I need to know, or I will have your heads. The Fates were never afraid of him. They already knew what was going to happen. So they spent that evening together, drinking, celebrating a long life, lived the way that they wanted. Not again ever thinking about the blade sitting just feet from them. Morning came, the nobles stormed back into their room, demanding answers. They had none to give. True to his word, the angry noble had them beheaded. They died together with a smile on their faces. And I was forgotten. The noble assumed that every part of their prediction was wrong. This axe that's of no use but to look pretty would have nothing to do with his destiny. So he stuck me in his armory, and there I sat. Seasons came and went. The noble never stopped his search. Till my next keeper intervened. A young boy, early 20s, devout on a life of exploring and discovery and adventure, stopped by the noble's estate, only asking for a night's of respite, maybe a meal should the noble be able to spare it, and the young boy would be gone first thing in the morning. At night, the noble's estate was chaos. Servants underneath the noble grew tired of this endless search of nothing, of being treated like dirt. Though they'd raised so many complaints, every complaint was met with anger and retaliation. Finally, they'd had enough. All of the windows of the estate glowed under the light of freshly set flames, parts of the manor filling with smoke, a small mob out front, ready to finally confront the noble and all of the misdeeds that he'd done. The young traveler, not wanting to be caught in any of this, but being ill-equipped to defend himself should anyone come after him, found his way to the armory, where he passed by dozens of beautiful swords with gem-encrusted hilts and daggers made of precious minerals, and stopped at the table where I lay. He looked at me, a useless axe, picked me up, and started to flee. The noble, in a frenzy, was trying to gather what remaining loyal mercenaries he could find, and stumbled upon the young boy fleeing the armory. The two locked eyes. The noble lunged towards the boy, saw the moment that he could strike. He saw the moment where he could simply reel back with the axe and end the noble's reign of tyranny. But that's not what I was meant for. I wasn't meant to shed blood. I was meant to bring people together. So, the young boy couldn't do it. He dodged to the side, out of the way of the noble's angry grasp. Watched him hit the floor and slide, and use that opportunity to sprint towards the door, away from the noble, away from the remaining loyal mercenaries, to the back door of the estate, and fled. I could feel his grip tightening. He'd never held a weapon, much less one as elegant as I, before. How we'd survived this long, I would never know. But I would keep him safe now. A keeper that I felt like protecting. And so we traveled. We went to the nearest town in search of adventure, in search of companionship. The young boy found others, much like him, seeking adventure and fame and notoriety. A small band of would-be heroes. Together, they would forge a tale of their own. They hunted dangerous beasts that threatened towns and trade caravans. They confronted bandits and put an end to their villainy. They did much less heroic things in order to get by, but they made sure not to write those down, and I was fine to forget them. All the while, the young hero got a sword, got a bow, had his own armor forged. With his sword, he spilled blood. I knew he hated it, every second. But he would not let harm come to his new friends. He still kept me by his side, although in his hand, I never shed blood. I was there when they met. I was there when they forged their bonds of friendship. I was there when they had their first loss. When the first of their pack died. When they held his funeral. And when they had a long, drawn-out argument of what to do now. Whether to give up this foolish charade of being heroes, or to keep going, to honor the memory of their fallen comrade. The young hero eventually gave in, admitting that they've already come so far. It would be foolish to turn back now. It would be spitting on the memory of their fallen friend to not see their mission through to the end. As I said, I never spilled blood in the hands of the young hero. But I was there when his blood was spilled. When his friends, in his most dire moments of need, weren't there. When he gave his life doing what he believed to be the right thing. Much like their other fallen companion, the survivors held a funeral. They talked about the things that they remembered about the young hero, the things that they loved, the things that they would miss. And just like that, he was buried and gone. I was sold off so that the surviving heroes could part ways, could seek their own journeys to settle down in a safer life where they could live for their fallen comrades. I was sold off to a traveling merchant, one that saw and understood the beauty of my craftsmanship, but said nothing. He knew what I was worth and was going to buy me for considerably less than that, claiming that I was simply just an old, worn-out implement, a hatchet. And the young hero's companions, desperate for coin, sold me off. My newest keeper was interesting. An older fellow who has gotten by in life through trickery and deceit. Like most of my former keepers who found companionship, family to get by. He was alone. Always alone. He traveled across the kingdom, finding trinkets that he could barter off for much more than they were actually worth, and then disappearing from town before anyone could get wise. He made quite a living, though he never sold me. He knew how much I was worth. He knew my craftsmanship. Why? One evening I decided to get the answer. As we sat there, him eating what was left of yesterday's dinner, a stew that had been reheated over a small pot, in a small pot over a fire. My metal gleamed in the firelight. He looked at me, and I begged the question, why haven't you sold me? Why am I still here? He put the bowl down, as if he could hear me, as if he knew what I was asking. He picked me up. He tossed the heft of my axe head around a little, looking over the inscriptions on the wood, the runes, the story that the old smith and his daughter had carved into me. He never really said much to me. He was very quiet when we were together, but I could tell that he was thinking. So I tried to force it out of him, tried to get him to talk to me, to tell me what he was thinking. That seemed to make him angry. As in that moment, he reeled back and tossed me into the woods, screaming out in frustration. Whatever emotions were soaring through his head, he kept them to himself. I think he spent the next 2, maybe 3 days searching for me, desperate to find a meal ticket that was worth a small fortune, and yet he simply cast it aside like it was a worthless trinket. He called out for hours, as if I could answer, as if I would after being cast aside so callously. But I stay silent. I buried myself in the dirt, and I waited. Exasperated, exhausted, he eventually gave up, screaming out that he didn't need me anyways. He didn't need anyone. He wouldn't let anyone or anything into his heart again, because that was the only way to keep from getting hurt. In the dirt I lie, cold and dark and damp. I needed time to rest, to think about my life, about the smith and his daughter, to think about better times, and to let the stink of that merchant wash off of me. Such an angry, confused man. And yet when I reached out in friendship, he tossed me aside. So there I sat. Or after the many months of sitting and waiting, I heard passing voices. These voices never found me, they never would. But still I heard them talking. I heard them discussing a familiar name, the blacksmith's daughter. She survived that night that the noble came and took me. While her forge may have been burned to the ground, wrecked, never to be repaired, she survived. In fact, she was the reason that all of those people revolted against the noble. She'd found him. She united people against him, all with a common enemy, all turning their backs on such a cruel, cruel man. She was there that night when the young hero snatched me from the armory. She was so close. And yet, by the time she got there, I was gone. She was hailed a hero. And with the noble dead, she took his place. She was kind. She was loving. She treated her people with the utmost respect and care. She was a seed planted after a wildfire, the noble having ravaged this kingdom, now prosperous under the care of the blacksmith's daughter. That was as much as I could hear before the voices were gone. They'd given me hope, though. Maybe I could find a keeper again, like the blacksmith's daughter. Someone would come along, loving and kind, deserving of a blade like me. I heard hoofbeats on cobblestone. I wasn't sure how long in between hearing that story of my very first keeper and now had passed, but a lot had changed. The air felt different. There were more travelers passing by me more often. This time, the travelers stopped. I heard angry voices squabbling back and forth, and then felt someone be tossed off the side of the road, nearly landing on me. This person cursed out to the others. I heard more thuds as his gear were tossed aside with equal callousness. The hoofbeats rode off, leaving this traveling minstrel alone. He got up and started to brush himself off, picking up his pack, his broken lute, and what was left of his pride. Finding buried there that I was ready to have a new keeper. So I uncovered myself, made myself visible and present, and I knew he could feel the importance. As he looked down, saw such a beautiful blade to be discarded and picked it up. I had never tasted blood or combat, and neither had he, so we got along just fine. He spent the evenings using me to carve firewood and to carve out a new lute. It wasn't the most glorious of purposes, I'll admit, but we spent a lot of time together. I learned songs and music. I learned how to sing, and I learned how to tell stories. over the months, his lute was finally finished. I'd carved away the wood into a beautiful instrument of joy. We traveled. We didn't always get the warmest of welcomes. Minstrels can have a bad reputation, especially one such as mischievous as my keeper. But we did what we could to spread joy everywhere we went. We sang songs to children, we serenaded lovers, played to dance halls where dozens of people swung around and danced to the beat. I had fun. I think I brought more joy to more people in that time than I'd ever thought I would. The time came when the minstrel could not travel, and he decided that it was time to settle down. He met a young gentleman who courted him every evening. The two were like oil and water sometimes. Sometimes they would have the worst arguments. They would fight and scream, but always ended forgiving, always showing that they truly did have love for one another. With the song no longer being sung out from the minstrel, the lute being forgotten, with me being forgotten, the two moved on. One day I found myself alone, left behind as they went to start their new lives. Though I didn't sit for very long, this time, my new keeper found me almost immediately. The days are hard to track, but I can tell that I didn't have much time to rest. This time, an old man. Older than, I think, even the blacksmith when I was first forged. He had such a gentle, kind way about him. When he stopped to rest his feet, people of the town passing by, smiling and waving and giving him all of the pleasantries that seemed to make him happy. He looked down, saw me sticking out of the brush, and picked me up. I could tell that a weapon like me was as foreign in his hands as I was being held by one whose entire life had been dedicated to healing. Not crafting, not singing, not conquering, but healing. The entire town knew him to be a compassionate, caring, and they knew that they could count on him for the most grievous of injuries, physical or emotional. He was there to listen to the townsfolk when they had problems. He was there to patch them up when they got a little too brash for their own good. Why he kept me around for so long, I'm not sure. Maybe he could tell that I was not the implement of war that so many figured me to be. So I watched. I saw him heal And I thought that maybe I could do that too. Maybe I don't have to be this blade, this tool to take. Instead, I could be a tool to give. So I learned, I watched, I started to understand the healing process, understand the healing magics. And years after years went by, watching this priest tend to his flock, tend to the village and all that passed through it. I learned how to heal. I would do this keeper no good. The ailments that he had, the things that were slowly killing him, was not something that could be healed. It was old age. He had lived a long, happy, natural life until the day that he was ready to move on. He had rarely looked at me all these years, rarely acknowledging that such an artifact was sitting and waiting, so much potential death and destruction. But there I sat. When the old priest finally did pass away, his congregation took over. They tended to his duties the best they could, but it would never be the same for this small town. People would leave week after week, with the old man no longer there to listen to them, to heal them. People stopped coming. Priests abandoned the faith. And soon I found myself to be the only occupant of the church where the old priest resided. The fires long since had died, and everything was quiet. I liked the quiet. It gave me time to think and to rest. My next keeper would not be one that saw me for what I could be, but only saw me for what I was. This village was not full of warriors or mercenaries. It was just full of people. And when a tyrant came knocking, they had no means to defend themselves. They had no choice but to simply surrender. Buildings were plundered. Heaps were ripped of their valuables. The church where I lie, the door was kicked in, and soldiers came tearing through looking for anything of value. It was collected along with everything else and brought to the tyrant. I was dumped at his feet, piles of ill-begotten treasure, waiting for his approval. He passed by most piles without a word, a figure tall, clad in blood-stained armor, scars across his face, till he got to my pile. He looked at me, a blade forged to kill, picked me up, swung me a few times, feeling the heft of my axe head, and smiled. The rest of the treasure, most of it, was melted down for metal, for valuables, but I was kept out. I would be his symbol of conquest. I would be the tool that he would use to conquer so many others. We rode from village to village across the kingdom, expanding his ever-growing empire. And I tasted blood for the first time. I cut down those that did not deserve it, that were just trying to defend their homes. And I wept every time. This tyrant would never know my purpose, would never know what I was meant to do with my existence. He only saw that I could kill, so that's what he did. And I hated him for it. Every moment, I never stopped hating him. His tyranny would continue. For weeks, for months, marching unopposed. Until someone finally rose with enough power to stand against him. A hero clad in equally bloodshed armor. Young but defiant. He held his blade out, ready to meet this tyrant in the heat of battle. The two exchanged blows back and forth. I could feel my ever-sharpened axe head scraping against the hero's armor. I saw my opportunity, so I took it. The tyrant found an opening and began to swing to try to strike and cut down the hero. I turned. Just enough. Instead of striking the exposed flesh in between the plates of armor, I struck the armor dead on. The impact reverberated through me into the tyrant, causing pain to shoot through his hand, causing him to drop me. As I tumbled through the air, almost slow motion, I saw the hero draw back the blade and drive it up into the tyrant. I finally fell alongside the tyrant. All of the blood that he leaked on this night, I celebrated. Every drop of it, payment for every drop that he made me spill. And I was happy to be rid of him. The ghosts of this battlefield would remain for many years. While the bodies were collected and buried, or collected and burned for some of them, their spirits remained. Forever. I saw them. They wandered, questioning why they're still here, why they had not yet moved on. I had no answers, but I sat and watched. Now, this is the point where I figured that my job was done. I was forgotten, alone, and none knew my name or my purpose. I didn't want to be found again, didn't want to spill more blood, so I kept myself hidden, tucked away in the dark, where I could be alone and think forever. But that would not be my final fate. I would be found again. A pair of siblings digging through the battlefield, of their ancestors, marching along the ghosts, bringing a ray of sunshine to spirits that had long since forgotten what that was like. They played, they ran, they laughed together. And all of the spirits of this graveyard stopped and watched them. I was intrigued. What had happened to this land that was so wracked in death and pain would now be so open and free that children could simply run through a war-torn battlefield with smiles on their faces? So I revealed myself. My curiosity got the best of me. One of them looked down and saw the metal gleaming in the sunlight and picked me up. They both looked at my handle, story carved in it, looked at the blade, as sharp as the day it was forged. And I could hear them talking about what to do with such a weapon. Their parents had always told them things like me were dangerous. Smart. But still, their curiosity matched mine, and it got the better of them. So, with me in hand, they ran off home. The wind against my blade, I felt free. I felt happy by their side. I knew neither of them could be my keeper. They weren't destined to be. But they would bring me to my final keeper. As we dashed through the woods, dashed across the river, I could hear again the hoof beats on cobblestone. I could hear wagons being pulled across the streets, dozens of voices all talking at once. Possible to pick out a single conversation, but still we ran on together. They brought me to their home, where they ran through the door, excited to tell their mother and father about this interesting thing that they found. This axe. Of course, they were reprimanded, their parents telling them repeatedly to never venture that far out, to never venture into the place where so many had perished. But even the parents got one look at me and were intrigued. They saw the carvings and looked at each other, almost knowingly. That night, I sat in the warmth of their home, waiting. I knew something was happening, but I wasn't sure what. They knew something that I didn't. Come the morning light, I would find out. The mother and father brought their 2 children and me and went to go pay a visit to the local ruler. I heard the children yell to their grandmother, go and hug her, though they did so carefully, as she's in quite a state after this many years. The mother and father also embraced her, and they talked for a while, laughing, loving, a family. And that's when they pulled me out. I finally got to see why they were so curious. Because they recognized the carvings on me. They recognized the story that was told of a blacksmith and his daughter. They recognized the family crest forever carved onto my hilt. And in that moment, I looked up into the face of the blacksmith's daughter, much, much older, now with a family widespread throughout this kingdom. She held onto her seat of power with love and with compassion. She looked down at me in recognition and started to weep. Her tears landed and washed away the blood that had stained my blade. I was finally home. Blacksmith's daughter kept me around, told me all of the stories, everything that had happened, how they hoisted her into this position of power, this position of nobility, and she took to it so naturally. Although it wasn't me that she was talking to. She was talking to the blacksmith. That was all right. I was content to simply listen. As all things must end, so did she. She passed on, surrounded by loved ones, with me in her hands, by her side, forever. The two of us were entombed right alongside the blacksmith, left to rest, finally, in peace. And that is the story of the weapon. Ooh. All right. If you enjoy solo RPGs like this, you can find a bunch on itch.io. This was called The Artifact. There are quite a few like it. There are supplements like the All Walks of Life supplement that help you to randomize your keepers. But yeah, this game is it's so good. It's it is such a fantastic storytelling medium. Um, I absolutely loved being able to do this. So I guess with that, we will bring this game to a close. Oh boy. Well, I do want to thank you all for being here. Thank you for supporting us and supporting the Trevor Project. They're a fantastic organization that does amazing things for at-risk LGBTQ youth. And I highly recommend you go check out their websites. Just support them however you can. And of course, I've been Andrew, your storyteller for this evening. You can find me on my Twitter, right up there. We post things like casting calls and whatnot for upcoming games because we do casting calls each and every month. The one for February should be coming out very soon. Oh, need to just take a breath. Get so lost in the story. It's just I just had a ton of fun tonight. Uh, but yeah, that's pretty much it from me. If you can, we are running the charity event for the Trevor Project. Obviously, don't put yourself in any kind of financial bind, but any kind of donation that you can make is so very appreciated. Let's see who is live right now. Sin is live right now. So let's throw a raid over there. Synthetic 20. All right. Thank you all so much again for being here. Heckin' love you. Heckin' love your support. And I guess, as always, be good people, do good things, and I'll see you next time. Bye, everybody.